Welcome to the channel. This is going to be a video about using Ionic framework with Storybook, and hopefully you will see the benefits of using Storybook and how easy it is to integrate into your application. In the end, this is the final product. What we're going to do is we're going to build a simple component, and that component has some content, and it has a title, and it responds to two specific events: a view events detail and an edit event. As you can see, I'm able to detect click events and basically emit custom events, and this view detail event is emitted, and it gives you the ID of the item that's associated with it. And this component also emits an on edit event, and in that event the payload is also the ID of the item. What we've been able to do is create the story and have different scenarios in the story. And this first scenario is just a default scenario with the default title and some content. The next one, we test that we can handle long titles. So let's see if I can press this. We're making sure the UI wraps, and here we're doing the same thing with long content, making sure the content wraps. These are just basic examples of different scenarios that you can validate all inside a Storybook without running your app over and over again. So I just wanted to give you a quick preview of what the final solution is going to be. Now let's hop to the code so you can see how to do this for yourself. Please make sure you click the like button, and please make sure you subscribe to the channel. This is kind of new for me because this is some Angular content. I don't really post Angular content, but I've been doing some Angular work, and I've been using Storybook a lot in it, and I figured, hey, let's put some content out for the folks who can benefit from it also. So let's get to the code. Thanks. Okay, now that we know what we're going to build, let's hop into getting the Storybook environment set up. See, here I'm on the Storybook page. Let's click on Getting Started and click on the specific framework. We're going to go for Angular here and just scroll down, and we're going to just follow. Really, it's as simple as this: npx sb init. Make sure you're in your project directory and you let it run. Okay, so we got everything installed. Let's see if we can run this thing and run Storybook. All right, so everything's built. Storybook is launched on, let's see, where did it launch it? I think it's running on, actually I have no idea what port it's running on. So let me just start this up again so I can see. Okay, so it's running on port localhost 6006. Let's fire that up over here in another window. And kind of this is what you get. And you kind of get your documentation and all this other stuff. I'm not going to cover the basics because you can just read that in the documentation yourself. We're going to hop right in, and first we'll just do a simple one to integrate Ionic so you can get an idea how easy that is, and then we'll start to do our components from our application. We want to start with this first one right here, the simple item component. So what I like to do is just leverage what we're already given. And if you take a look inside of your source folder and you look inside of stories, they've already given you some sample stories here. And they kind of lay out how things are supposed to work. So if you look at the button stories, you have a basic one, and I'm going to take this first buttons one, and I'm going to use it for my, what is my component? Where's this guy? Home. My simple item component is going to be the first one we're going to do. So that's the test. We're going to take this one. So this is our first component, simple item component, and we're going to copy this button stories to make it. So let's just copy this, and we will rename this. Let's rename to simple, what did I call it? Simple item component. Let's just call it simple item stories. Take this out of there. And so we're going to go right here and we're going to say Ionic. So we know these are Ionic tests, and we're going to say simple item component. And right here, you include the button that you want to work with, and the button, however, the component we want to work with, it's called the simple, right there, simple item component. It looks like it automatically installed it for me. I mean, put the import there. We'll look at the arg types later, so let's remove that. And our basic template will be based off this component, so we can just take this component and put it there. Say yes, that's the component we want, and the arguments are component. And these are the different types. I like to start my first one out and just call it kind of the default story that we want to test. And in our default story, so I call it and just to get started, to show how cool this is, we will pass no arguments and we're just going to get started. Okay. So it says it can't resolve app simple item component and users error inside menu stories. It's not inside menu stories. Well, let's see, why didn't it import that correctly? Let's try one more time. Let's delete this. I could go find it, but I'm hoping that Visual Studio Code will just import it for me. Okay, so it looks like there was just an unsaved file. So everything's compiling properly now. Let's look at our story, simple item stories. We have two templates, our primary and default. We don't want that. We just want our default template. Okay, so a couple of things that we need to add to get everything working. So first of all, we need to add the ng module to get all the Ionic stuff in here. And so the way you do that is you add that in a decorator up here with the default. And so what you do is first we create decorators. And once you get this done once, you're going to find that you're basically just copying and pasting this into all of your other tests, because it's pretty straightforward. And what you want to use is we want to use what you call module, MOD, module metadata. And it's the basic stuff that you use in your normal module declarations. And you got to bear with me, guys, because I don't do a lot of Angular stuff. So I'm really just starting to get back into this. And I'm doing this video because I had to spend a lot of time creating a bunch of stories for a current project that I'm on now. And I realized I hadn't done an Angular video in a minute. So I said, let me just give this one a try. And then, of course, we need to do our imports. And then, of course, we need our default Ionic module import. So we import our Ionic module. I'll put our for root. And we save this guy. Get this thing to recompile. So you can see we have our first default component. And it's working inside of a story. And so let's go look at back here. Okay. So let's try a couple of things just to get you guys the hang of how it works. So right now you can see if we look at our, where's our component? In our component, if we look at our HTML file, so let's open up our HTML file, you see it's got this message that it's displayed here. So let's kind of, since this is a card, let's kind of change this a little bit. And so we save all that. We see we got our space there. And so what we want to do is we want to make this, so let's say, item title, and call this, and then we're going to use this as item content. And they should bail out to empty because we have no idea what item is. And so let's go into our component here, and let's assume in our component that our component takes an input of item so that it knows what its value is. And the way that we want to do that is we want to go in and we just want to say input, and then we're going to call this item, any. Okay, so now what we can do is in our story, let's close this out to get some more space. We go into our story, and we say, we go down here, and on our component, we actually say on our component is a template. And we set our template to be, you got to use your backticks on this. And we're going to say app simple item, and we're going to pass that value in. And that item is going to be passed in a property called item. And then we close this guy out. App simple item. And then what you can do down here is we can define the arguments. And we know we have an argument called item. And that item has a title, default. And then I believe, what was the other thing that we said we have in our story, our simple item component? Content. Let's go back here. Okay, we got everything saved. Let's see if we got our story working. And it isn't working, so what did I do wrong? Unexpected end of file. Do you have unescaped quote in your template? Use. Alright, there's something in my template that's not. Back to our canvas. Okay, let's try and take these out one by one and see what happens. All right, so there's our card. Item, title. Okay, so it looks like there must have just been some bad characters. Item, content, and then we get the content. Okay, so then, yeah, there must have just been some bad characters. So now that you have your basic story set up, here's some kind of interesting things that we can do. So let's go back to my simple story. So this is our default one. Now let's try one like this. So long title. Long title. I'm going to say default title, but this is really long and should wrap. All right, so it looks like our title is wrapping the way we wanted it to wrap. Long. And then, oh sorry, long title args. Okay, so now let's click on our long title story. See how that looked, and so that worked right. And then now let's create another story and call this long content. And we'll just take our long title and put it down here in our content. And then let's look at our long content story. Back to our canvas. Let's make it really long. All right, so it is wrapping, so that's what we wanted. What else we want to do? We want to add some buttons on here, and we want our buttons to do stuff. So, okay, so now we have our two buttons down there. They're floating right. Let's do style. Let's put a little margin, style. See how that looks? It doesn't look too bad. Let's reduce our button size a little bit because it looks a little too big. We don't want to go all the way small, so let's just zoom them a little bit. Point. All right, so now we have our buttons, right? But I need to do something when this happens, and I want to know what I did. So now we have our UI, but how do we actually see if I'm clicking on the appropriate item? So what you can do is you can create actions and have actions associated with these specific guys. And it fits in with this whole idea of having small components. So what we're going to do is we're going to emit events for specific actions that happen in when clicking on those buttons. And for that, we're going to use the output. And so let's say output. And then for output, we're going to say on view details. And then for that, we're going to use an event emitter. I'm going to say any for now. And then what's the other one? We have the edit. And so now we have so let's import this output. This is going to be on edit. And so we have these guys set up. Now let's make sure we put them in our test template here. Yeah, we're just going to emit them directly. So let's go to our stories. And what you have is with your stories, you have the concept of actions. And so what we can do is, let's go to our story here. And so now on our story, we know that we have 2 events that we need folks to respond to, right? Those events are going to be, I like to visually have this lined up. So we're going to have on view details. And inside of here, we're going to create our own event called on view details number 1 event. And then the other one we have is on edit, I believe. On edit. And then we're going to have a method called on edit. Okay, and so now we need to actually handle these because it's complaining because we're not handling them, I believe. So let's push this up. And there's, as I said, there's the Storybook has these concepts of actions, and with the actions, we can, let's click over here, we can track it to see that the events are actually happening. And so that's what we're going to do. So to actually have the actions be associated with these specific clicks, the way you do that is, hold your phone, the way you do that is we're going to add some additional properties that we're going to pass here on the arguments. And so for our properties, first you definitely want to pass all the arguments over. But what we're going to do is we're now going to add these other methods. And these other methods are, right now, we have onViewDetail. So we have this method called onViewDetail. And basically what that is, it is onViewDetails. So we say onViewDetails equals onViewDetails action. And then the action we wanted to emit is this. Okay, and then I need to import actions. And that action comes from Storybook AddOn. So let's import that. We don't need this one anymore. So now we have our Storybook AddOn action. And so that's on view details. And then now let's add on edit. So semicolon there. Did I pass my arguments properly? On edit. Oh, I'm missing my quote there. I'm missing something else again. What did I do wrong? Oh, I missed my quote up here too. Okay. So, some bad typing. I guess this is what happened when you do things in real life. So now, hopefully, if everything happens correctly, I should be getting events fired when I click on. Actually, I need to actually put the click events on my buttons. So let's go back to my component and let's do here. On click. I like to actually put the function inside my code just in case there's something else I'm going to be doing in there. So this would say click view details D-A-I-L-S. And let's add an ID to this guy. So we're going to say item.id. And then down here, we're going to say click edit. Let's say just a click, because that was happened. So you clicked view details and you clicked edit. Okay. Now inside of my component, we're going to add those methods. And then inside of here, we'll actually emit the events. And so what we'll say is, and for the click edit, we'll say on edit. And for the same thing, both of them, we're going to just pass an object and an object. We're going to pass item ID. So that's how this guy is supposed to work. But the last thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that in our stories, we don't have an ID on our items. So let's make sure we add an ID as all of our arguments. Format this document. And let's see what we get. Let's make this a little bit bigger so that we can actually get our actions and everything to appear down here. So here's our actions. And so if I click view details, why am I not getting my actions? Actually, I think I know what I did wrong. This should really just be this. I made it more complicated than it needed to be, I believe. Let's give this a try. And let's look at our add-ons, and you see we got our actions emitted. All right, so basically I had structured, let me shrink this back down to size. See our canvas. I had structured the way I pass these arguments incorrectly. So all you really need to do is just the name and the action. So this is the function, and it's the action that's going to be emitted. And so on view details, call this function and then emit this action. And the cool thing is it's going to pass the payload. So as you can see, when I click view details and I look at my add and my actions, in the payload, I get the item ID that I want sent. And then if we go back to our canvas and if I click edit, go back to my add-ons, and you can see I got my on edit event and I got the appropriate payload sent over, which was my item ID that I wanted. So this was, and also if you notice, the pretty cool thing was that I did the bulk of this development just using Storybook. I mocked my data that it's put in, and I was able to be pretty productive pretty quickly. And then now let's go back to our actual application. So in our home page, we need to actually pass the items, the objects in that that are needed by our component. So our component needs an item, and then we have to handle some events also. So now we have everything that we need set up inside of here. So the next thing is, I don't want to call, yeah. So the next thing now is we now go into our component home page. Here's our simple home. Let's go down here. And for now, in the next part, we're going to actually add new items and we'll create an array, and that's how we'll fill this simple item. But for now, we'll just hard code one. So let's just say item, and we will just use some default data that we have from our story. And do this, do this, do this. And there you go. We have an item object. That item object is being passed on our home page to our component, and it's being rendered here. But the thing that we need to handle is we need to handle the view details and the edits, right? So when these events happen, it calls the on view details and it calls on edit. So what we can do is we can go into our home page and we can add these functions on view details and then on edit. And for now, since we don't really have anything to do, we're just going to say alert plus, and then we should have gotten passed in here. Item ID gets passed in as our payload for both of these. So we're just going to destructure it. Item ID, view details for item ID. On edit, view details, edit details. So we're getting the events thrown to us properly. And let's do one more thing just to show that we're not doing anything tricky here. And we're not cheating or hacking. Go in and let's just add another simple item. As I said, we're going to make a list of these later. We'll add another simple item. And this one we're going to call item 2. And let's go back to our home page. And let's go in here and let's copy this. Item 2. Default title for item 2. Simple item content for item 2. See, now we have our 2 items here in the list. We can see that when we click our details, details for item 100, details for item 200, edit item 100, edit item 200. Okay, so I think that's where I'm going to stop for now. Let's just quickly go back over the basics of the story. Let's go back to the story. Here's our simple story. Let's move everything out of the way. We imported our component. So a simple component is the component that we're testing. We added this decorator to bring in any modules and other things we needed. For this one, all we needed to declare a component, and we needed the Ionic module. In the next example, we'll show how you can import other modules to use. And so this is kind of how you kind of set up the story. And then we create our default template for our story. And so this is our default template. We pass in any arguments that come in, get passed as props, which could pass down to our object. And then we added 2 additional arguments, properties that were needed, and they were these functions. So what you're doing with these Storybook actions are we're basically saying when this event is triggered, call this action and give it this name. We're assigning the name that's being used, and then kind of whatever objects or parameters or the payload for the event, pass them along too. And so that's why in here when I click view details and I looked at my actions, I'm getting my payload, which is the data that I'm passing along. So this is a cool way for you to ensure that your events are happening. And then you just draw out your template, right? And so as you saw, this template that's laid out here is the exact same way the template's laid out inside the application. And then what you're able to do with, which is really cool, what you're able to do with these sidebar here is you're able to kind of test out, let me make this a little bit bigger. You're able to test out different scenarios based on the payload that's being passed in. So I'm able to kind of really work on the user interface for this single component independent of the application. I'm able to kind of create this card and see how it works without creating a bunch of data and going through this process of loading a bunch of data every time I want to test it. So I think it's pretty cool. So in the next part, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit more functionality to this component. And then we're going to switch back to the application. And on this new item page, what we're going to do is we're actually going to have an input form here. And what we'll do is we will build out the input form completely inside of a story here. We'll test all the events. We'll test the form validation, all other stuff inside a Storybook. And then we'll just drop it back into our application. Everything will be fine. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please make sure you like and subscribe. Like I said, I don't do Angular too often, but this kind of came directly from work I was doing on a client project with Angular, and I thought it'd be good information to kind of share with the community. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Take care, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.